This week is Parshas Bamibar. Bamibar is a very big parsha. I think it's the third largest parsha in the Chumash. And all the three largest parshas are all in Sefer Bamidbar. The biggest parsha is next week, is Nosai, which is 177 psukim. The second biggest parsha, I believe, is Pinchas, which is 168 psukim. And this, I think, is 159. It's a very long parsha. Bamidbar is a very long parsha. But there's very few Rashis. Because it's the same words over and over again, 12 times. The same words again and again and again and again. The Yidden are being counted. And it's very, very clear that counting Yidden is so important that the Torah doesn't just give you it speaks out the name of each Shevet, the name of the Nasi of each Shevet, how many people there are. And then it repeats the whole thing a second time. After it goes through all the 12 Shvatim, in, I guess, yesterday's Chitas, Monday, today, which is Tuesday, the whole thing's repeated again. Why? There's a very, very interesting feature in this Parsha, that not only the Yidden are being counted, but they're being situated. They're being told where they live. Right? The Jewish people, the camp is called Machane Yisrael. The entire camp is the Jewish camp. And the numbers are, it's 3 parsa by 3 parsa. A parsa is 4 mil. So it's 12 mil by 12 mil, which is 144 square mil. I believe, and I have reason to think so, that the halachic criteria of a mil is what we would call today a kilometer, which is about 2/3 of a mile. So the entire Machane Yisrael is 144 square kilometers, all told. And there were several million people in that area. It's a pretty concentrated, pretty dense group of people living together in tents. And the Eibishter arranges 3 Shvatim are to the east, 3 Shvatim are to the south, 3 Shvatim are to the west, and 3 Shvatim are to the north. Yehuda, Yisachar, and Zevulun are in front, next to Moshe and Aaron, and the Reuven and Shimon and Gad are to the south, which puts them next to, as you'll see a little bit later on, our good friend Koirach from Shevet Kahos. And in the back you have Menashe, Ephraim, and Binyamin, and in the north you have Dan, Naphtali, and Asher. And the Torah repeats the whole thing again. But this time it adds a word. They're called machanos, camps. There are 12 shvatim and 4 camps. Each camp consists of 3 shvatim, and each one of these machanos had a degel. They had a flag. You had degel machane Reuven, degel machane Yehuda, degel machane Ephraim, and degel machane Dan. There were 4 flags. And the Chumash in today's Chitas repeats everything it said yesterday, the names of each one of the 12 Nesiim, how many Jews were in each Shevet, and then a total of how many Jews are in each Machane. So it's very repetitious and very structured. And how many Chiddushei Torah could you take out of enumerating people again and again and again, and just it's so structured, so formal, and so detailed, and so repetitious, and so on and so forth. So many years ago, I gave a class on the Degolim. I have 2 classes actually. It's going back probably 15 years. I looked at my material. I don't have access to my notes. I don't know where my notes are. I just see the classes online. It's 2.5 hours on the flags, on the Degolim. Today I'm going back to the Degolim because I'm speaking not a word about the word Degel. If you have a Chumash handy, which I do here, lechavachabad.org, it says like this. I'm reading the second pasuk of today's Chitas. It's Kapitel Beis, pasuk Beis. Ish al digloi, each person on his flag, BiOsos, to their signs, to their indicators. Lebeis havaisam, to the house of their fathers. Yachad b'nei Yisrael, the Jewish people should camp. Mineged, adjacent, that means far but not too far. Saviv, around. La'oyel moyed, the temple of meeting. Yachadu, they should rest. The tent of meeting, they should rest. So I gave a class on the word Degel. I want to give a class on the word Oisos. I'm very fascinated by this. When I learned Chitas early this morning, I learned Rashi, and Rashi grabbed my attention. You know what? I'm doing this. Each one of the flags was a ois, was a symbol. It represented something. So tonight's class is on this. Ish al digloi BiOsos. Each Yid camp with his flag. Today flags are not a big deal. But if you know history of mankind, and especially history of warfare, flags are very important. You may have, as a child, played a game called Capture the Flag, right? There's a very popular game which is quite interesting, which is called Stratego. You're going after the flag. In the olden days, when people fought battles with with muskets, with guns, and large groups of people, it was very, very noisy. It was called rallying around the colors. The color bearer, the person holding the flag, was the first part. They got shot down, and someone else picked up the flag. And the worst thing that could have happened was if your enemy took the flag. The flag was the symbol of your very identity, and people would literally die not to have their flag taken, and to rally around the cause, to rally around the flag. It was a very, very important thing. These flags were not for war. These flags were for identity. The Eibishter wanted there to be 4 flags. Each flag is for 3 shvatim together, and the flags are called la'osos. La'osos means to their sides. So I don't want to talk about the flags, I want to talk about the symbols of the flags. So we start with Rashi. Rashi says 2 translations of what osos means, what it means that the flags were symbols. Number 1, that every flag had a different color. Every flag had a different color. The flag of Yehuda, I believe, was red. And the rule is that the Kohen Gadol had a breastplate. The Kohen Gadol wore a Choshen Mishpat. On the Choshen Mishpat there were 12 stones. These were precious stones or semi-precious stones. Were very expensive, so were not so expensive, but they were precious stones. Each stone had a different color, and some of them were multicolored. The Rashi says the flag was the color of the stone on the Choshen of the head of that degel. Meaning, Yehuda, Yisachar, and Zvulun were 3 shvatim together. But Yehuda it's called Degel Machan Yehuda, the flag of the camp of Yehuda. The color of the flag was the color of Yehuda's stone. And the same is true for Reuven, the same is true for Binyamin, the same is true for Dan. I remember hearing years ago, I think I even saw a picture, I've been told I don't know what I'm talking about, but I have this recollection that in the Altnai Shul in Prague in the olden days, on the ceiling there was the Degel Machan Yehuda. The Baral Prague Shul, where the Goyim's remains were placed in the attic, I have a recollection that flag was extant until not so long ago. It's not there anymore, but I even think I saw a picture of it. Now, people have told me I don't know what I'm talking about, but I remember hearing such a thing. But these flags were big and they were colorful. So the first definition of ice was each flag had the symbol of the color of the head of that that degel. What?
I was in a Yekish show in Switzerland and they had all the flags, all the Shvatim flags.
But the question whether they're accurate. The question whether they're accurate. But I mean an original. I don't mean a picture.
You mean like the actual flag?
Yeah, something like that. The Altnai Shul in Prague. I have such a recollection. Then Rashi has the second pshat, and the second pshat is interesting. He says, "BiOsos." According to the signs, says Rashi, the signs that you got from your Zayd Yaakov Avinu. Before Yaakov Avinu passed away, he called his children together and he instructed them about how he wants his Levi to take place. And he told them the following: Yosef shouldn't carry because he's a king. Levi shouldn't carry because he's going to be the father of the Kohanim. The father of the Kohanim. But Menashe and Ephraim should carry in their stead. And he said to them, Yehuda, Yisachar and Zvulun should carry my bed from the head. Reuven, Shimon, and Gad should carry my head from the right side, from Dorim. Menashe, Ephraim, and Benjamin should carry my head from the west, from their feet. And Dan, Naphtali, should carry from the north. So Yaakov Avinu gave them instructions that they should stand around this bed, 3 on each side, and that's how they should carry his remains to Eretz Yisrael. So when hundreds of years later, the Eibishter says, Ish al digloi BiOsos, says Rashi, each Yid camped on his flag, BiOsos, based on a symbol which was given to his ancestors by Yaakov Avinu himself, hundreds of years before that's how the Jewish people should arrange themselves. That's the second type in Osos. That Osos means a simon, a zecher, that the Jewish people have going back as far as Yaakov Avinu. It's the second pshat in Osos. Number 3, there's a Chizkuni. Chizkuni is fascinating because you never know which edition is going to have something to say on what subject. Chizkuni is an obscure edition, And some more to Chizkuni says, the Rashbam says, and Ibn Ezra says, I'm just going to crunch it all into the Chizkuni because whatever they say, he says, and he says more. The Chizkuni says, Ish al digloi ba'oisois lebeis avoisam. He reads it, ba'oisois lebeis avoisam. Each flag has letters on it. Letters written on it. And what are the letters that are written on the flag? The letters written on the flag is lebeis avoisam, to the house of their fathers. Translates the Chizkuni. He's not the only Rishon who says this. Could be even in Chazal as well. On the first flag, the flag of Yehud, it had a letter Aleph for Avraham, and the letter Yud for Yitzchak, and the letter Yud for Yankov. On the second flag, it had a Beis, the second letter of Avraham's name, and a Tzadik for Yitzchak, and an Ayin for Yankov. So it was Betza, Beis, Tzadik, Ayin, which means money, or something else. The third flag had the Reish for Avraham, the Ches for Yitzchak, and the Kuf for Yankov. So it's Reish, Ches, Kuf, Rachak, Rochik, okay? And the fourth flag had the last letters. Rochik, far away, remote. The fourth flag had a Mem for Avraham, a Kuf for Yitzchak, and a Beis for Yankov. Together it spells Makab, Mem, Kuf, Beis. Now, if you spell out the letters of the Aves, Yitzchak's name has 4 letters, Yankov's name has 4 letters, Avraham's name has a 5th letter. And we don't leave out the last one, we leave out the Hey, the second to the last letter. So it's the first letter of each of the Aves on the first flag, the second letter of each of us on the second flag, the third of each of us on the third flag, and the last of each of the Aves on the 4th flag, and left the Hey is left over. It's brought in the Tziyuni, which is an obscure Kabbalah Sefer, that this Hey was left over, the Abed joined it with the letter Yud, and this represents the Shechina. In other words, the 12 Shvatim are surrounding the number 13. What's in the center? The 13th is the Eibishter. And the Hey, which is left over from Avraham, joins with the letter Yud to represent the Shechina, which sits at the center, just like Yankov Avinu was carried by his 12 children. So you have 13 principles. The 12 children carrying the remains, and then the Yankov Avinu's Guf Kadosh. The Yidden surrounded the Beis HaMikdash with the Golim, with flags BiOsos. There was a symbol, lebeis avoisam, and every flag had a remez to the avois ha'olam, to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yankov. And the Hey is left over, at least according to some opinions, to represent the Eibishter himself. Another thing which is brought in some Chazal, it's also Chazal, but it's brought also some Rishonim, that each flag had a picture. On Yehuda's flag there was a lion, because Yehuda was an Aryeh. Reuven's flag had the face of a person. The reason that the face of a person, because you know what Dudayim, remember the story with the Dudayim? That the Reuven went out into the field and he found Dudayim. Dudayim is jasmine. And jasmine used to be used for fertility. If someone wanted to have children, they would take jasmine. The reason jasmine is used for fertility is because it's a plant. You could look, you could take a look, take a Chumash Rashi. Rashi says it and it does. It's either or, but the bottom line is that the reason people used, it's a Rashi. Rashi says, the reason people used mandrake or jasmine for fertility is because it looks like a baby, it looks like a person, it looks like a human face. So Reuven's dega, the face of a person, reminiscent of the Dudayim which Reuven found, and Leah traded them with Rachel Avinu, and then she was able to have 2 more children from Yankov Avinu, and so on. The flag of Ephraim had the picture of an axe, of a shoyer, because Yosef HaTzadik is called B'choyer Shoyrei Hadolei, right? Ki ba'apam hargu ish u'b'tzonim ikru shoyer. Yosef is called an axe. And on the flag of Dan, it gets a little tricky. A lot of people say, what does it say? Yasmin. It says Yasmin. On the, by the way, it doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means that's what it says here. On the flag of Dan, most people say it was a nesher, it was an eagle. What does an eagle have to do with Shevet Dan? The answer is because it says about the eagle, Kinesha Yar Kine. Eagles are very protective of their young and they're very gentle. That when they enter into the nest, they enter in such a way that they don't frighten their young and they don't displace them, they hover a little bit. So Dan was called Ma'asa V'chal HaMachanes. Dan was the last of the Shvatim to travel, and their role was to pack up the whole camp. If people lost anything, they would pick it up and return it to them. So Dan served a similar role as a matriarch eagle to be gentle for the rest of the Jewish people. But it does say in some sources, as in Medrash, that on Dan's flag there was a nachash, a snake, which would make sense because Dan is compared to a nachash. Now, if you don't go with that second interpretation, you understand that you have the Ragli Dal Merkava, right? If you study the Sefer Yecheskel and you read about the divine chariot that Yecheskel saw, and we're coming out to Shavuos, this week is Shavuos. On Shavuos, the first day Shavuos, which is this coming Sunday, we're going to read the Haftarah of the Merkava Yecheskel, that means Ezekiel chapter 1. And we're going to read about the 4 faces of the chariot. The 4 faces are Pnei Adam, and Pnei Aryeh, and Pnei Shoed, and Pnei Nesher, the face of man, the face of the face of a lion, the face of a man, the face of an eagle, and the face of an ox. So the oisais, the signs on these flags now have 3 different gestalten, 3 different pictures, 3 different things on the flags themselves, plus a broader symbol. A, they had a certain color. B, they had certain letters. And C, they had the picture of a certain animal. And D, they were reminiscent, they were symbolic, they were an ois to something that Yaakov Avinu had proposed, how the Jewish people should carry his remains way back then.
Do you know which Sheva was which color?
Reuven is red and Yehuda is neufach. Dan was leshem. The color was the color of the stone. And the stones we know. Right, correct. Now, in addition to all of this, there's 2 midrashim translating the word oisais. Ish al digloi bi oisais. Every single shevet, every single grouping of shvatim, every 3 shvatim had a flag which symbolized their sub-camp, but oisais, and it was a symbol. So there's 2 midrashim that I'm going to mention. The first midrash is that the Jewish people are compared to a vineyard, a grape field. When people plant grapes, they don't just plant them ad hoc, they organize them, they make them rows, they make them neat, there should be spaces between them for the purposes of harvest and for the purposes of being able to grow. If you plant trees too close to one another, they end up not growing, they're stunted. You have to give them enough space to grow, and sometimes you have to cut on one branch, the other branch should expand. So there's a whole system of how these things are done. You anticipate how big the grape tree or bush will become, and on that basis you space them accordingly. So the Medrash says the Geffen, when you plant a vineyard, there's an order of rows, and the Jewish people have a similar order, and this is the concept of Ish al Digle, the concept of the flags. So I was thinking, I don't know if this is true, but this is what I'm thinking. The Jewish people's travels in the desert was very carefully organized. It was very, very precise, very meticulous. Every shevet had its place. You couldn't go wherever you wanted, and all the rest. I think the additional word ba'osos is saying that the organization was not only a general, it was very, very specific. Meaning, it wasn't only this shevet was here and this shevet was here, but within each shevet, this family was here and this sub-family was here. In other words, the word ba'osos comes to indicate that the degree of order was absolute.
How do they decide who's on the outskirts?
Who was, I don't know how to make those determinations. But ba'osos, there was a symbol that, in other words, the way the Medrash translates osos means the symbol of order, organization. I want you to know, I'm using this as an example. I think it's a good example, even though it's a bit hard to correlate. The Rebbe went to camp 3 times. God Yisrael. Each time he went to camp, he did an inspection of the camp to the screw. He went into every building, went into every room, maybe not the bathrooms, opened every closet and every cubby. And in any place he found disorder, the Rebbe complained. So Zayin Gesundheit Starker Marchion V'Shalom Shleima Kunyan told me and a few other people that he was the manager of the Gashmites of the camp, the general manager of the camp. And the Rebbe was coming, and they cleaned up the camp spotless. But they had to put stuff away, junk. They put it into one closet. And the Rebbe said, "Was ist da?" And they made him open it, and the Rebbe complained about that. They wasn't happy. They want to be perfect. I mean, Lubavitchers are so not that, but the Rebbe was so that. The Rebbe wants everything to be perfect. Everything has to have a place. Doesn't place, put it in the garbage, but don't keep things around to make a mess. I think that's what the Medrash is saying. There's digloi, there's camps, and then there's ba'osos. The organization is not just more or less, it's not basically good. You go into a house, everybody has their own room. Go in each room, everyone has their own cubbies. It's neat. Everything has a place. That's what the Medrash is, I think, saying. The second Medrash says that we're like the Malach. And this, the truth of the matter, the Zohar says this. The Zohar says about our entire Parsha, that all these counts, how many Yidden there were. One camp is 101,000 Yidden. Another one is 159,000 Yidden. Another 186,000 Yidden. In the Zohar and our Parsha it says that Machane, Gavriel, Mechol, Refol, Nuriel have the same numbers of Malachim as the 4 camps. In other words, the biblical description of how Yidden added up in number and where Yidden were arranged in their location was a reflection of the supernal Makab, of the divine chariot. That's why these details are in the Chumash. They're part of an eternal Torah. Even though these numbers only apply then, they don't apply now, because they represent something very supernal. So the second Medrash says that Yidden are like Malachim. Malachim sing, and when Malachim sing, they sing in order, they sing in groups, they sing in machanais. The same is true. And he brings a pasuk for the Malachim. Srafim ein demima aloi, and he brings a pasuk for Yidden. Ish al diglei BiOsos, that when Yidden served Hashem, when Yidden sang, everything was done with a seder mesuder. Everything was done with a perfect, with an exact, with a very, very precise order. I just want to say one kvetch from the Tziyuni. The Tziyuni says, the pasuk says, Ish al diglei BiOsos. So that it says, Ish goes in Yankov Avinu. Because Yankov Avinu was called Ish Tam Yeshev Eholim. Ish, Yankov Avinu was called Ish. Al Diglei BiOsos, the 4 flags follow the Oisos, the symbols and the signs which Yankov Avinu provided for the Jewish people. Okay, these are the facts. I gave you now, if I remember correctly, 2 Rashis, a little bit of a sort of an amalgamation from a Cheskuni, and 2 Midrashim. That's 5 pshatim on the word BiOsos. Now I want to be a little bit creative, okay? So the Cheskuni says that the word Oisos means letters, Oisius. Rashi says 2 things. BiOsos means colors, Gavnim. And then Rashi says BiOsos means it's a symbol that you have from the Ovis. So I'm mamish making up a pshat. Okay, and here's how I'm going to present this to you. In Chassidus you learn that you have 3 types of names. I have to do this quick because the clock has no mercy. 3 types of names. This is what's called the Shema Pa'ula, Shema Toyar, and Shema Etzem. Okay? If you sit down and make a picture, and a friend of yours walks by and says, oh, you're an artist. You say, no, I'm not an artist, I'm just drawing. If a person knows how to draw, but they don't have a passion for it, it's not their thing, they sit down, they make a picture. Some guy walks by, sees what they're doing, says, you know, you're an artist. It doesn't describe who they are, it describes what they're doing. This is called the Shem HaPa'ula. It's a name that's describing an action. If you remember Tanya chapter 15, there's Ovid and there's Eved. Ovid is Shem HaPa'ula. There's something you give a person a name, the name is not telling you who they are, the name is telling you what they're doing. Then there's Shem HaTayar, a person who's very gifted in art. A person who's very gifted in art is constantly drawing. And if they're particularly good, they, by mistake, make beautiful pictures. You know, people who are talented, they take a pencil and a piece of paper and they scribble and then magic comes out. So if you go over to such a person and say, you're an artist, that's called Shema Toya. You're not describing what they're doing, you're describing who they are. The third one they call Shema Etzem. Shema Etzem means a person who, for lack of words, will call him he's a genius. You know, who was a genius? Van Gogh was a genius. I read about Van Gogh. He was a real Meshuggah. He cut off his ear once. But he was a genius. And art has a lot of components. It's how he sees things, it's how he imagines things, and how he depicts them. You know, there have been artists who are geniuses, incredible geniuses, right? The oldest artist that people speak about is a guy named Da Vinci, right? But there have been many artists who are in the class of genius. Geniuses are so good at art that you could almost say it defines their neshama. So I gave you 3 levels. Shema Pa'ula, Shema Toya, Shema Etzem. Shema Pa'ula means a name that describes what you're doing. Shema Toya means a name that describes who you are. Shema Etzem means that if you're a genius in that field. In the language of Kabbalah, Shema Pa'ula would be Kalim, or Chitzonius HaKalim. Shema Toya would be Pnimius HaKalim. Shema Etzem would be Oyer. Some people have art in their neshama before they ever picked up a pen and they drew the 4 picture. They just have art in their soul. And by the way, the same is true of music, right? Same is true. Some people play or sing and you're a musician. No, I'm playing, but I'm not a musician. Some people are musicians. and some people are geniuses. What I'm proposing is that Rashi's, the Cheskuni's pshat, that BiOsos means oisios, letters, denotes that on these flags there was a symbol which describes the Jewish people as what they are based on what they're doing. That's number one. Rashi says on every flag there was a color. According to Kabbalah, the Gavnim, the colors represent the Oire in Soif, the way it comes into the Kelim. Okay? So I'm going to argue that the Rashi's pshat, that the flags had colors, denotes that these flags described who the Jewish people were, not based on what they were doing, but based on their personality. And the fact that these flags also reminded them of something that Yaakov Avinu had said about them hundreds of years before BiOsos, this indicates that these flags revealed what the Jewish people are, again, for lack of words, on the level of genius. So I'm making a proposal, a pshetel, and that's all this is worth. It's a pshetel, it's a drush. That the word BiOsos means you looked at the flags told you about the people carrying those flags on three levels. This is what they do, this is what they are, and that this gift of what they are is so deep that it's in the madrega of genius. It's the madrega of the very essence. In other words, their neshama is gifted in art or in music or wherever it is. Before they actually use the skill, you could feel that this is who their skill is. So this is my Dvar Torah. Okay, we talked about the flags in a previous year. Today I'm talking about the symbols. And this is sort of my insight. That the flags had on them symbols that told you about Yidden. On a chitzonius level, on a pnimius level, on an etzem level. On all three, looked at the flags, you knew who a Yid was, which grouping of Jews it was, on all three levels. You're going to say?
Two things. One, about, we were saying Avram that didn't have the hay. That was his original name also, was Avram, and then it became Avraham.
Delicious. A home run. So good. That's very good. And I didn't think of that. And none of the Mefarshim told me that.
Really?
Yeah, the Mefarshim all said, well, the hay, you know what the halacha is, the Gemara says. Kol hakei la Avraham, Avram eve belav. After Yankov's name was changed to Yisrael, we still call him Yankov. After Avram's name was changed to Avraham, you're not allowed to say Avram. So perhaps that's why, but the point well taken.
He used to have a 4-letter name.
Also 4 letters, right, very good. Okay, Maitiv.